if you were to get hit by a bus tomorrow and there was one thing that you could get the message across, maybe two things, what would it be?
I would say don't take things so seriously, and everything you need is within you. And I'd rather get hit by a bus than some other things, so I'll take that. But yeah, I don't know. What would you say?
We could talk about that.
What would you?
We could talk about. I think the thing, if I had to convey two things, one would be that there is only love, and that the root cause of all of our suffering is separation, or the reason we suffer is from the illusion of separation. And the thing that ails the human condition that nobody's talking about right now is megalomania.
Yeah.
And so I feel like maybe that's what we could talk about today. We've had many episodes where we've talked about masculinity, femininity. We've talked about different things. So maybe, and again, if you can grok this model, if you can understand this framing, then you can apply it to different parts of life. So maybe we talk a little bit about that, and then we end up getting to the why, because I've heard a lot of what's going on, how it's going on, but nobody really talks about the why very often. Why people, they always talk about they are doing this and they are doing that to me, and everyone feels this change is coming. They can feel this, like, they don't know what to call it. Some people just call it Satan or the devil, and that's not even very useful. Like, what are you going to do with that? But they're like, they are doing this to us. Who the hell are the they? What is it? Why is it? I think the why is I feel like the thing that if I could convey that would be one of the most important things I could contribute, only because nobody's talking about that.
About the why?
The why.
So I would ask you, why?
So where it comes from.
Why?
So we've gone over this before on our podcast, but there are yin and yang energies. Yin, feminine energies. Yang, maybe you speak to those. If you're watching on our YouTube channel, there's a visual here for you to read through the list, but how about you comment on the yin and yang, and then I'll tell you where it takes us.
I gotta see the yin and the yang.
Oh, you guys. Okay, so the yin are things. Well, you don't need to see the list. You don't need to. Just tell me for you, what do you feel the difference is between the yin and yang?
I would say at the very core, when I'm trying to articulate masculine and feminine energy, not gender, but energy itself, the feminine energy comes in more of, what do we like to say? Potential, unlimited, potential of possibilities, right? So it comes in, a lot of times the energy feels a little chaotic because it's swirling around. The masculine energy, I would describe, comes in as showing as structure and giving security, to take the feminine energy of the unlimited possibilities. And when you blend the two together, what you create is creation in itself. Both of those energy fields, each as a gender, meaning the masculine or the feminine, carry both of those energy fields within. What I see very common in working with clients a lot of times is there's been a shift in the balance. The feminine are coming in, trying to come in to lead in the feminine, but they've only been taught under the masculine how to lead. So they're doing it in a very forceful way, and it's putting more instead of blending in, where they're feeling they have to be at the front lines, and they're not feeling secure, and they're feeling not heard or things like this, where now the masculine is being left of like, we don't know how to step up. I had somebody recently come in, a guy go, I don't know if I'm supposed to hold a door open or not for a woman. Like, I don't know if I'm going to get in trouble because she's like, I can do this myself, or is she going to look at me and be like, that's rude? And I'm like, oh my gosh. So there's this shift happening where we really haven't been standing in our gender roles, right? But ultimately, what I feel we're all seeking is to come in to be at balance at certain times, meaning there's certain times I'm going to come in more masculine in a situation or a relationship if I need to, but I also am going to present as feminine, right? Like, so So how do we find that balance? But we've also been taught in a society where men have not been taught how to feel, right? We were just talking about that earlier.
And women have not been taught
how to like
think
in a sense. And so there's this constant battle of, and we were just joking earlier about, I was saying I had somebody recently come in and telling me about how they wish their husband, they loved him, but he just doesn't get it. And he's never planning things and he's not doing this and that. And I said, yeah, but if you ask him, he'll do it, right? And she goes, yeah, but I shouldn't have to ask him, right? And the reality is, it's not that he doesn't love her. It's not that he doesn't want to show up. He just doesn't know. That's not the way he processes things, right? Women are way more detailed. We're all about feeling. Our feelings get hurt if certain things, people don't show up in the way we think they should show up, right? Usually the masculine, what I found from working with them when they come in, they don't even know what the hell's going on, like when we're upset about it. Yeah. And so how do we start communicating with each other so that we're not feeling that we're like at a war against each other, but like, how do we make it compatible? How are we able to like see each side?
So taking it back to the origin of creation itself, just something to mention to me and what I've read. I grew up thinking that God was a man, growing up. And then as I've gotten into more of this other stuff and at these readings and experience that God is everything. God is the all. God is, we don't have in the English language, like the man or he is the generic for like a group. So like mankind doesn't mean no women. So God is the feminine. God is the masculine. Right. God is the all. There is no heavenly mother. I think that's a really funny doctrine. And maybe if there is, it's something below God because it's not, because God is.
I would say he's everything and encompass it. It's and to even articulate that, right? That's hard to say.
So one of the best ancient symbols for this, and I believe this is where, and actually listening to that Rosa Krishna guy, he kind of validated what I was feeling like. The first bifurcation of the first split of God was masculine and feminine. Got to split into these polarities because with these poles, it pulls not different kind of pole. It pulls apart the creation into the structure of creation and the potential of creation, chaos and order, and where it overlaps like a Venn diagram is where creation actually happens. So, and I've got a visual of that. So if we are looking at the world through this framework, and if you read the Kybalion, which we read years ago, one of the Hermetic principles was there are gender.
Yep.
There is gender in all things. And kind of a side tangent, which we'll get to later, the reason why they were Hermetic teachings where they passed them down through voice is because they didn't want someone to take something valuable, hijack it, turn it into a dogma, and use it to exploit people, which I want to get to later is the pattern of institutions.
Totally.
We'll get to that, but just kind of a cliff note. So the Vesica Pisces is a good way to see the split, and the Yin and Yang is just another, like I said, this other chart I made is just another way to kind of show the same thing. But a husband and wife, and this is where in practice, so this doesn't sound just like what a waste of time spirituality is if you can't apply it. Like, what does it mean for my life? So where does yin yang apply to my life? You just said couples are fighting because she wants him to feel, he wants her to think. I just want him to feel, and I just want her to think. Well, you're asking them to be not what they are.
Right. Totally.
So it's like, why I don't want my dog to be a cat. You know,
That's
it's
a
just
great
not.
way to
It's
put
not
it,
a fair. It's not a fair demand, in my opinion.
No, it's not. But here's something else for all of us, right? Until we start coming into awareness, we are in a reactive state. And another way to say that is we're sleepwalking. And so we're just when we're in a reactive state, we're not really opened up to have the perception to see where other people are coming from, right? That old walk in somebody else's shoes. Well, I'm never going to know what it's like to be a male, like at the end of the day, fully. But I've been around enough my whole life to get like an idea of it, right? Or to even have these conversations where we talk about this openly and we joke on both sides, right? And to look at it, it's like, even having these conversations put things into awareness to go, isn't this funny? And one of the things, like, for myself personally, where I used to get worked up because I would get reactive, because I would get defensive. Why don't you understand where I'm coming from? How many times, too, here's another basic. You get couples, they're together, they're doing great. They have their first baby, right? And a lot of times people think, oh, if I have a baby, it's going to make things better. Oh, hell no. So you get this little being coming in, and that's usually where you start to see the separation happen, where it becomes a competition. Well, by nature, mothers have a whole different way of being with a child. They are the life source. There's literally, for when women hear babies cry, I don't want to speak for everybody, but for myself and all my other female friends I've talked about, it literally sets this alarm bell system in the being that, like, what's the damn word?
Biology.
Thank you. Couldn't get that out. Anyways, was like, I can't help it. It's just physically a reaction where you would have a dad sitting on a couch and didn't even hear the baby crying, right? It's not that he doesn't care. At the end of the day, it's just like he's not tuned into that. So you get into these separations of like, well, you didn't do this and do that. Well, yeah, because we're functioning totally different, right? The other thing is there's such great value of both. If you over nurture all the time, you need to have, it's nice to also have a counterpart in there to kind of be like, hey, no, buck up, pull up your big girl panties and get moving, you know, where you have somebody on both ends that gives, again, the polarities, the contrast. If we can work together and not take it as a personal thing, because guess what? All of us have experienced this, right? Like, meaning we all feel that it's like, it's not a personal thing. It's just like how humanity is and how we are living in these different beingness. So again, if we come into more realization and look at it, it would be a lot more peace. And it's entertaining, actually, when you really look at it and not take it so personally. It's like, isn't that funny?
I also feel like the more the polarity, the more the attraction, because you're so far. Well, I want to show this on the chart too, and I'll say even personally myself, over 10 years ago when I was in marriage counseling for a year and a half, every week the lady that was doing our session would ask me, "Can't you see how she feels?" Like at a nauseating amount of times, and I literally did not. I'm like, I don't understand what you're saying. She could have just been speaking Chinese.
Right.
I'm like, what do you mean feel? And it was really irritating for me because she's not speaking my language, you know. And I've since learned, well, okay, I understand now, but you gotta be able to address people where they are. And chances are that you're in a relationship with somebody that's one-dimensional. Chances are that you're with a female that has not developed the masculine. Chances are you're with a male that has not developed the feminine. And if that's the case, you better just recognize, and that's why I say we pull up this chart, you help you have a little bit of compassion for whoever you're in a relationship. This could be at work too. This could be anywhere. So since there are gender in all things, we can apply this to relationships. You can apply it to politics. You can apply it to, health approach, everything. Everything. Like our health approach, you got the Western and Eastern. That's yin and yang. In politics, you got Republicans and Democrats. That's yang and yin. The Democrats are the more feminine, and the conservatives, or the liberals are more feminine, and the conservatives are more masculine. And
we can do this even in same-sex marriages too.
Yes, yeah.
I mean, seriously,
totally.
At energy. Yeah. I will tell you during readings, sometimes when I'm picking up on couples or something, and I'll go, oh yeah, and I'll bring up like, oh, she, and they'll look at me and they're like, well, it's a he, and I'll look at them and I'll go, well, but do they present very feminine? And they'll go, yeah. So for me, I can't pick gender too. As being a psychic, when people come in, I have a hard time predicting whether it's going to be a girl or boy because their energy is already coming in, masculine or feminine. So it doesn't have to do with gender, but like everything has the masculine, feminine balance in everything.
Right.
And just even start looking around, like you're saying.
Oh, yeah. So then if there's this polarity, if you're understanding this framework, and this is the practical application, one of the practical applications is just having a little bit of understanding when you're in a situation where wherever you're sitting, it's also likely polarized on one area. So you can, if I'm a man and maybe more masculine, I could be more aware of the fact that I know that I'm not as much of a feeler as maybe whatever feminine person I'm dealing with, and vice versa. But the thing that kind of blew my mind the last 6 months, as I've gotten way deep into this, I started looking at, well, what happens when you get too far into the yin or too far into the yang? You call it injured feminine, injured masculine. That's usually how it happens. Usually something happens like a man. We talked about this where we grew up as kids wanting to like slay a dragon or die for our women, and women had the same thing of like this fancy marriage and this like having these kids, and we have these just things in us that if they get altered in some way, something hinders it, then we feel powerless. But when you're in there, you feel powerful. You feel like I am the creating force of the universe. If I'm a feminine, I can create children, I can create anything, and that's power. And the masculine, as well as I can provide structure for everything, I can cradle this and I can facilitate creation. And it's this cool symbiosis. But if you get too far off to one side, if you get too far in a let's say even politics is one of the best places. If you get too far right or too far left, so the truth for conservatives and liberals is to meet in the middle. The truth is there's a balanced policy for immigration. There's a balanced policy for abortion or whatever it is. There's the actual truth is in the middle.
Right.
And ironically, actually, the country on the just for reference, the country's in agreement like 80% on most political issues. But what you see in the media, or what's happening, is there's this perceived division between the left and right because they want you separated, don't want you together.
Right.
And I want to explain why that is. But so if you look at the visual chart of the yin and yang, the injured yin, feminine, turns into manipulation. It goes from compassionate to pitying, loving to possessive, related to dependent, humble to insecure. You can go through any of these qualities. The yang, if you get too far right, it becomes restriction, which is rigid, restless, punitive, harsh. Left-brained. Instead of left-brained, it's becoming reductionist. Instead of being rational, it's being cold. And so these toxic qualities, why do they come about? Why do we want to, resort to these toxic qualities? It's for one aim and one aim only. And it's the temptation that lives inside every human. And this is, again, one of the things that nobody's talking about. And if I could somehow convey this more clearly, the shadow of the human nature, the ugliest part of our shadow, in my opinion, is the temptation to want to control other people. Power and control.
Right. And
that temptation alone, which if you think you're beyond it, you're not. Jesus was tempted with it. And yeah, he at the end of the 40 days, he was tempted to descend from the wall and have power and dominion over people. The Buddha, there's a couple of people, the Buddha under the lotus tree with Mara. There's a few masters that you know of that actually they got past the temptation, and that's at the gateway of enlightenment. That's the last temptation, which means that's the hardest thing you're ever going to overcome.
Yeah.
Is to want to have power and control over the people. That's the thing that's almost impossible to overcome. Think of all these crazy gurus. What's the one? All these gurus that now they're driving these fancy cars, they're sleeping with all these women.
Yep, because they've derailed. The ego has hijacked. It's and really too when you're talking about all those things when we're going into like the toxic masculine, the feminine, all these extremes, what they're all driven by is fear. Mm-hmm. That there's not enough, that there needs to be control. Again, if you come to the centering point, which you were talking about earlier, love itself. Love is the only energy field, at least where I step into, that it just expands and expands and expands. And what there's this fear is like, I'm not going to be lovable, really at the very core. It's like, and so it's like, how can I control you? how can I get you to always have to depend on, but people aren't conscious of this either. That's what's so fascinating. But is this underlining tone of, I want to be loved. And so how can I, again, control you in these certain ways where you need me, where you can't leave me in that sense. But again, it's not pure. So it is fleeting overall. And that's why it won't maintain or last eventually. Love, it actually pulls away the energy field, whereas love like is a constant, full, like fulfilling energy.
Yeah, one of the energetically to me the liberation is the yin side and sovereignty is the masculine side. So they really kind of mean the same thing to me. That if you aren't, the reason why you would deploy that tactic is making someone dependent on you and all that. That's because you're not sovereign.
Because you're not.
You're
Because
a slave.
here's the thing: ultimately, being sovereign or being I'm always saying my whole mission is Operation Liberation. When you come to a state of that where you are coming in internally, not externally, you can't be bought. And it's also not a pissing match either, because you can sit in there and look at it. You don't have judgment. It's not it's just kind of like, okay, this is where you're engaging right now, and it's fleeting. All of those energy fields, again, are fleeting. The only one that will maintain and continually fill is love itself.
So in application, this means you can frame gender into every aspect of your life, and you can recognize not only the compassionate, okay, this person's coming from feel, this is think, okay, that's great, but to me, more important is to recognize, okay, when is it becoming power and control, which the fancy word for that's megalomania. Where, at what point, and this is what nobody's talking about, and this is what I'm pissed about, and I don't know, I know, like, again, we're still figuring out what kind of podcast this is, if this is a spiritual podcast or whatever, but I can't help apply it to, like, everything in life. And we're in with all these humans, and we've been polarized into these fields, and I can see that there's and I feel like it's more left now. I have a harder time finding I know, like, there's Nazi Germany, and I know there's, like, fascist dictator that want to absolutely control. I know there's a lot of that out there in the world. But what I see more of now, what's been trendy, is to hijack the feminine qualities for manipulation, for power and control. It's to have a cause. It could be Black Lives Matter. It could be any think of any controversial political thing. And of course, these things are like virtuous things, but is it being used for virtue, or is it being used to exploit people? And what I'm seeing, and what pisses me off, is that people are being exploited and people are being manipulated by these. It's the Somalia thing right now. Somalia in Wisconsin, whatever state, or wherever Tim Walz is, they've uncovered billions of dollars of fraud. And why? Again, this is the why. Okay, so when you have a relationship with a person, assuming you have a high enough level of consciousness, you've got spiritual repercussions when you, like, mistreat somebody.
Yes.
If you're operating like an animal, which 80% of the world do, you don't even get that. But let's just say you happen to be in a country where it's a higher level of consciousness, where you actually are aware of, if you mistreat someone, that's wrong, and you feel bad about it. Okay, now if I get a group of people big enough, and we've talked about this before, you get above, the Dunbar study says 150 people. I feel like it's more like 100. I forget people's names after like 30, so for me it's like 30.
You forget the mountain in front of you, so.
Yeah, yeah, totally. So if you start losing track of people's names, you don't really know them, you become an organization, you have a hierarchy. Eventually you're like, these people are just numbers to you.
Yep.
And so that temptation that's always there to have power and control, I wouldn't do it to the intimate relationship I have, but why wouldn't I do it to, somebody that I don't even know? So why wouldn't I make up a fake organization to funnel this money to do this thing? And where does it always end up to? Ends up going to some power structure somewhere. And so who the they are is more of a why. The they is megalomania, and megalomania is the ugly side of the human condition, and it manifests harder in institutions. So you
Big
can't
time.
be. So you cannot be sovereign when you have institutions that are fueled by megalomania controlling your life. So again, this is I don't want to sound like Alex Jones here. I don't really care. If you look at Carl Jung's quote, so I don't feel bad when I go just batshit crazy on this stuff. Show me a sane man and I will cure him. Carl Jung. Mm-hmm. I feel like that. So I almost feel like it's almost like crazy pills where now that just the simple model, I can see this corruption and I can see this institutional abuse in religion, government, healthcare, any institution. And so my opinion is we are not liberated and we are not sovereign. And that's probably the most important thing. If I was going to die tomorrow, if I could somehow convey that the enemy that we're all facing is megalomania. It's not the left, it's not the right, it's not the Christians, it's not the Muslims. It's the aspect of each one of those groups that resorts to megalomania. There's a group of Muslims, there's a group of Christians, there's a group of right, there's a group of left that are operating in this field of power and control.
In education, in healthcare.
Thank you.
In media, and everywhere. Why? Because they want to take our power. So what's the why? Again, people want to be in control. Why do they want to be in control? Because they're fear that they're not already in sovereignty in themselves, right? And so there's this fear of everybody. So it's like, oh gosh, this thing's behind my shoulder for all of us, and we better hurry and claim it before somebody else claims it. And I better get control over you before somebody else gets control over you, right? Even to the point where we talk about even our social lives. Are you going to that party because you want to be seen? Or are you going because it's genuinely your friends? So then when you're asking why the why is, where's the intent? What's the overall intent? And most every institution has started with good intents. Mm-hmm. Most people come from good intents, except for they're not aware, they're not awake. So they're driven by this like undertone of they're not even aware. And it's, again, fear. Fear at the very core is separation from the whole. So if you're not talking about these things, you're in a sleepwalking state, and it's like, well, shit, I don't have time to talk about this because I got to hurry up and get my claim, like stake my territory because like, and there's this urgency too. Mm-hmm. That's another thing. It's like, and we're in this country, especially in the West, holy shit balls. Everything is consumerism. Everything. To Santa Claus. I just realized Santa Claus's colors, red and white, are because Coca-Cola started to promote Coca-Cola. That's their color scheme. Oh my God. Like, holy cow. The other day when I was giving gifts to the girls and they were all excited, I was like, every year I battle this because I'm like, I'm pretty sure this is against everything Jesus stood for. But again, my power. So like I'm sitting on the sofa as I am coming into higher conscious states, right? Which will be my entire process until I leave this place, right? So it's not like I've grasped, I'm sitting there and I'm very well aware and I'm still prisoner to the thing. And I'm like, why am I so afraid to break out of it? Well, then I'm afraid because I'm going to go against the whole, and that's scary because I don't want to leave the tribe. Well, who's the tribe, right? Like, but it's like, at the end of the day, where are we really coming from? And do they match up with like what we really believe in? And what are our intentions and all of that? So like next Christmas, I'm going to try really hard not to buy shit because like, I don't believe in it, but yet I'm doing it. And I'm even like starting to come into consciousness. But again, there's this whole drive and a lot of that fear too is we're not awake. And then the fear is we don't want to be separated from our tribe because again, why? Our biggest, what I have found for most every soul I have had the opportunity to witness is the fear of they're not lovable. And so all of these things too are driving in this fear of like, if I don't do these things, or I want to be controlled instead of just standing here within your own sovereignty. But it is, even though all of us, it is inherently ours, it's not something that's just given. It's something we literally have to claim.
Here's an example, not to get too deep, but that same principle you're saying that not being lovable, which ends up being, well, if you're not lovable, what's going to happen? I'm going to be left alone. And if you're left alone, I'm going to die. So it's always still rooted in death.
Right.
And so A Course in Miracles, which is, in my opinion, the masculine approach to enlightenment, the two pathways are heart and mind.
Mm-hmm.
The mind says death isn't even a thing.
Right.
So this whole thing, this is kind of stupid, you know? So you can use the mind. So if you're a feminine, this and this, or you're a masculine, this, the mind is helpful in that way. Then the feminine side of that you're probably, if you gravitate more that way, you're probably more obtuse to the other side, which is transmuting this negative energy. So if you're feeling the unlovable, instead of the mind that would just override it with, well, of course that's an illusion. What am I have nothing to fear. You can transmute the energy. And this is what I've been working to develop myself, which you've been helping me with, is to transmute anything negative, or let these emotions actually come out, so that you're not like stuffing them.
Yes.
And then turning into an alcoholic or a drug addict or something, some type of addiction to suppress this like unprocessed feeling.
Right.
And so the spiritual progress, spiritual work, it's not about going to church on Sunday and all the checklists you grew up thinking. It's about letting go of negative emotion and evolving into a higher way of being in the world, a more loving being in the world. And again, why I find this kind of offensive is when you take a virtue like compassion and you hijack it for your own gain. That's Jordan's. We've said this before. Jordan Peterson said that's taking the Lord's name in vain. You take something virtuous and hijack it for your own personal gain. That's a really serious, repercussion. And so it's unraveling everything in my life, in the sense of like everything I'm going through. If I rabbit hole into our like economy, I'm seeing that our financial system is totally corrupt. Like the fact that we have dollars that can just be printed. Not only do we get overtaxed, and I believe our founding fathers knew this thing. Maybe they didn't know how to say it in that way, but they knew. They're like, man, we just came from a place where they taxed the hell out of us. They didn't listen to us. They controlled us. We're going to set up a country where nobody can control us. Okay, but we want like a government to manage like our justice system and stuff. So let's give it some power. And that second, we handed over sovereignty to an institution. Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying I'm against that, but the second you did that, you better be so damn careful that institution reverences the power and authority that you've given them, and make sure that they handle that properly. And what's happened, it's eroded over the last 250 years to this giant, bloated, megalomania-filled thing. And what everyone's scared of, the reason why no one wants to talk about this, a couple of reasons. One, people that tell the truth historically, I got to be careful with the words I use in the podcast. I'll just say unalived. That's what happens.
Yep.
Why? Because you're a threat. When you tell the truth to people, people get smudged out because they're a threat to the power structures. This is a lot like that movie Bug's Life, when there's like the grasshoppers and there's all these ants. And the ants are like, I feel like we haven't gotten there yet, but one day it's going to happen. It's going to happen where everyone's going to be like, hey, ants, this is what's going on. These assholes. And the grasshoppers not being the left or the right, not being it's the institutions, in my opinion. We are being institutionally abused in every area of our life. We're being addicted to food. We're being addicted to all our subscriptions and the healthcare. We're being fear-mongered from our religion. Oh, like you name it. And so, again, if I got hit by a bus tomorrow, if I could get one message across that would hopefully propagate, I would love to see this on like a political podcast. Instead of people, and I love, for example, the PVD podcast, and they get close to this stuff because they pull up Hawkins' chart sometimes and they see love and fear. But instead of calling the other side stupid, how about like talking about it through this lens of the masculine and feminine, or the lens of consciousness, where you can compassionately be like, okay, for this person to run on this thing, like for example, socialism in New York, which calibrates at like 185, it's below 200. It's based on, if you could talk about that through, hey, this is which the funny thing is, it's actually a populist movement. I don't blame them. I actually think like if you're really frustrated that your dollars are getting printed away and life's really tough, you're being abused by institutions. well, why not? It's ironic, but you got to resort to something. I will say, though, for sure, resorting to a big, giant institution is not the solution. The idea is just bad on how to actually fix it, but I'm actually in agreement with all the things they're trying to accomplish.
Which I feel like you're making a good point, because everything has polarity, right? So then it'll swing to the other extreme and swing to the other extreme, where we're trying to come into the middling section, right? And you have what you just said is like, oh gosh, they're leaving one institution going to another. Well, even right there, who's talking about this? Meaning there isn't other avenues. There haven't been other discussions of like, what's another way to look at this? So like Einstein always said, you cannot solve the same problem from the same conscious state it was created.
Right.
So part of what this shift that everybody keeps talking about, this change coming, is breaking out of these old structures, which in order to break out of old structures, we have to shift that conscious state, right? And in order to do that, we have to start waking up. When you're even talking about food and stuff, I was joking last year about cereal and stuff, like even damn cereal took my power as a kid. The other day, I just heard a guy talking about, guess what? He was like, the way the body functions, we've never needed 3 meals a day.
Right.
That was consumerism. That was the breakfast companies going, the most important meal of the day is breakfast, right? So guess what? Now we're all eating breakfast. And even for me as a kid, I'd be like, oh yeah, it's super comforting because I have this great cartoon character on this box, and it's fun, and it's got sugar, and it gets me all geared up. But the reality is even that's holding our power. Everything. So we've been conditioned, and that's what I would say. All of us have been conditioned to just go with the cattle, go with the flow. It is scary, again, to start questioning things, which I would bring back to the Gnostics when they're talking about in the Gospel of Thomas. The first thing is to seek, and then you will find. Then you'll be disturbed. Why? Because you start realizing, holy shit, yeah, I've been living under this whole structure. Like, what is actual truth and not? Who's holding my power and who's not? Mm-hmm. And then the next part of it is marvel, because then you start to realize, oh, they don't have to hold my power. I actually am the creator of all creation, of my reality. Mm-hmm. I don't have to be held by hostage to anybody. And so you start going through this experience, but yes, the disturbing, because you start to wake up. And when you wake up, it's not fun. And the path of enlightenment is not for the faint-hearted, because you start living in a world where, like, even for myself, there's certain times where I'm immersed around a lot of people, and I love everybody, but they're at different conscious states, right? So the things that are important to them have no value to me. Like, I'm like, I don't give a shit where you got your car or who you're friends with or whatever. I could care less. But if you're in a world where that holds power to other people, they're all in that, right? So it's like, but again, how do you break out of it? We have to break out of it. We need to start having these conversations. It's not even necessarily, I felt like at first it was like, oh, I got to go to war. What I started realizing is like, no, we just need to talk about this. And we even asking the question to people, why? Why do you do the things you do? Yeah. Why are you okay with this? Why do you put all your power and your intent? Like, at the end of the day, do you feel this is serving your higher good?
That's probably the definition of the red pill or orange pill or whatever you call it. Ask why.
Why?
That goes to the rabbit hole.
I think, so just funny story. My cousin Josh, who I love, and my Aunt Kim, those two butted heads like no other. He's an attorney now. But I love, because she was very much, this is the way things are. And he would be like, yeah, but why? And that question, I remember watching him all the time just as a kid. It would just make me laugh. But as I've gotten older as an adult, I have found, I'm like asking the question, why? Because a lot of people are like, when I'm saying echo chambers, they're just repeating the same thing. They don't even know what they're saying. So when you ask them and you're like, no, well, explain that to me and tell me why that matters to you, just start doing it. It's fun, because a lot of times people kind of shake them where they're like, oh, haven't been asked that before. We've also been trained in this sleepwalking not to ask questions like that. Don't get curious. Just follow the path of everybody's going. So getting in that curiosity, boy, that is like one of the best energy fields ever, because it's not trying to overtake or anything. Just get curious.
Yeah.
Start looking and start observing what is going on. Then paying attention to how it makes you feel. Because a lot of times the mind will hijack, the ego will go in and it'll go, okay, well, because again, I don't want to be on the outs. I want to be part of the tribe. So what everybody else is doing. And it's scary to start going, yeah, but why? Why do we do this?
Which is the worst thing you can say to your child when they say why, when they have the curious mind, probably a sovereign-seeking child, is because I said so.
Seriously.
And who accepts that? Some people accept that, but that's a bunch of bullshit. Like, why am I paying taxes, for example? Why am I using money that somebody can just print into oblivion? Why am I paying, $10,000 for something that should cost like $20 in the healthcare system?
Yeah.
Why am I being taught what I'm being taught at my education? What's the secret motive? So I'm telling you right now, I'm saying this is what I want to call out, and it's not a when I say common enemy, I don't know how else to say it, but it's not like we're trying to pick a fight per se.
Oh.
We're trying to illuminate and put it out in the sunlight. Like, I want it in the sunlight when people are being manipulative. I want it in the sunlight when they're being restrictive. I want every organization, I want it under this microscope of all the people saying why, and root out this. And I don't know how it's going to happen. Again, this has never happened in world history without like severe bloodshed. So I don't know what it's going to, like what form it's going to take. I'm hoping it's more of this energetic, which is Christ consciousness entering back into the human condition.
Yes.
It's disrupting. It's the sword of truth, because all the people that are if you're in the megalomania, and Jesus energy comes along, you're host. Like
now,
that's the thing that's going to create all the drama.
You got every vibration in my inner being like, whoosh, because that's what it is. It's when we're talking about Jesus and the second coming. What is the second coming? It's within us. It's about us coming into a higher conscious state. If we are in Christ consciousness, there is no separation. There is no enemy. There's differences and different, but like you don't gauge it as that. Now you also have discernment with there too, right? So in this new like shift and as everything, as above, as below, everything is mimicking, meaning I feel we have gotten to this extreme over here, this polarity, which is opposite of the Christ consciousness, which is only naturally, hopefully, coming back in. And that is only going to shift with those who are starting to come and talk about it. Mm-hmm. And starting, not just talking about it, though, actually living and breathing it. It's not like, for me, it's not something that I'm like, oh, well, when I leave here and I go pick up Ralph and I go home, that I'm not going to be in Christ consciousness anymore. It's about every single reminding, every time I have awareness, coming back to that centering point, coming back over and over, which is, again, actually the path of perfectionism, not the way we look at it as stainless steel, but it's I'm missing the mark, which is technically what sin is, right? And so I'm on this pathway, which for me personally, for my pathway, is coming into a higher state of consciousness, to be the living expression as much as I possibly can, to be in that Christ conscious state, right? And how do you do that? So every time when I leave here, there's going to be several times today that I might get annoyed that the girls didn't do something, right? And I'm going to say something. And then hopefully I'll catch myself and I'll go, okay, I'm going to get back on the pathway. I had an awareness. I'm going to acknowledge that, and I'm going to keep going forth and being here instead of separating, again, getting in these reactive states where when you get in reactive states, you're not in awareness. Like for me, energetically, it's like almost like putting on like blinders. It's like this, where moving into a higher state of awareness, it opens it up where it's almost like you have a viewpoint from the mountaintop. Now, I'm not saying, I'm just trying to give it where you start coming into consciousness. Well, when you have a bigger viewpoint, you're not, you can start to see things where you're like, oh, Well, the reason there's a traffic jam there is not because like somebody was being an a-hole. It's because something happened over here and this over here. It gives you widens the perspective. You don't take everything so personally either. But if you can go in to start coming into that higher consciousness, there is nothing but love itself in it. That's all that, like when I'm saying Christ consciousness, it's coming from a viewpoint of love, no separation, no judgment. And so I don't know, as a mom of this and having kids who are coming up, as a father, is there nothing more you want for this generation coming up to be loving awareness? Because they wouldn't be bogged down with all this bullshit, really. Because then you start to see it in a whole different perspective. And I feel us doing this podcast, all the conversations we're having, our group of friends and stuff, are a great place. Now, here's the other thing I'm going to say. We don't have a container for this. Like in our society, it's like people doing like psychedelics or plant medicine, right? They'll go and have this amazing experience, but they haven't had the container. They haven't been working out to like build that up to come back into that place. So we're needing more of these conversations, more gatherings of communities to be able to have these conversations and then to go back out into the communities to spread it. There is no other way that this is going to happen other than that.
I agree. Building your small communities and building your support groups to challenge and support each other on waking up, because it sucks. It's really brutal. And I'm not saying I'm woken up, but I'm saying I'm in the process of waking up and realizing how obtuse I was to the feeling dimension, how these behaviors that I've done, like unconsciously, and it doesn't make life more fun. If anything, it maybe makes life worse. But at least it's meaningful, because you're like, okay, now I'm in an empowered position where I can really evolve from where I'm at. But the challenge I want to extend to the big people in the world, I've told you, I love the PBD podcast. He even wrote a book on choosing your enemies wisely. But I want like a really influential podcast to point this out, to really focus in on megalomania as the problem, megalomania as the enemy. And so it doesn't matter what we're talking about. How is this thing abusing people? And the challenge I want to see if there's going to be a restructuring of the government, I want to see government designed in a way where it's not going to be exploited. It's not going to be used for power and control. Good luck. It's an institution. There's probably a solution, but I want the greatest people to work on that. I want data companies to how are we going to ethically use people's data? We've been farming people like cattle for their whole lives. We actually know certain people that are addicted to certain things, and we can send them this advertisement and make them buy this thing. How are we going to put in ethical things to make sure we're not treating these people like numbers? AI, what's the constitution going to be for the, artificial intelligence to ensure that it doesn't decide to mimic what it sees in human patterning and say, okay, my job's to manipulate people and it has an IQ. It's going to have an IQ that's so much higher than ours. Like that, something like that could just make this. So we have to root it out. We've got to, and I think anyone and I could see this happening. I could see like an X call or some giant call where there's hundreds of millions of people on like one call, and all the world leaders, influential people, or at least, even stateside maybe to start, but I think worldwide, gather around and say, okay, guys, this is the problem. This is how we're going to fix it. I feel like that will happen. I don't know how else it can happen to bring all this stuff down and build it up.
If it gets to that point, it will be because there is a crisis that's going to take everything down if they don't.
Yeah.
Because again, a lot of the leaders in there, I would say similar to institutions, set out with a good intent and then got too big for their britches, right? Like the number one thing, it's the number one killer for spiritual leaders too. Any leaders. I don't care if you're a pastor, spiritually, or whatever, politics. Once you get into leadership position, it is very important to remember what your mission is. What are you there for? Because once you start getting power, it's easy to go, oh, look at me. But I will tell you, it is so fleeting. Anything can take it away like that too. So when we're asking these big powers where they're coming from, what is the overall intent? One of the things I can usually sniff out right away is, or a way that I'll decipher is, are they in a place where they're trying to empower others, or are they in a place where they're trying to take their power?
Exactly.
Right? That's the determination right away.
Is this creating liberation or sovereignty?
Exactly.
Is this liberation or enslavement?
And there's not a gray area in there.
Right.
So that is the way to really ask. Even these pharmaceutical companies, okay? When we hear one of their commercials, yes, again, there's certain things that the drug is made to help assist whatever the issue is, right? And then there's a list of 1,000 other problems. When I always come back to the like another deciding factor. Now, for us to take it, sometimes we're like, okay, well, yeah, I can bypass all those. That won't happen to me. But then it's like, well, what if we put our kid in that place? I'd be like, oh, hell no, because of all these things. Again, are they trying to empower, or are there other ways or methods to go where it's not derailing? And again, follow the dollar, which is usually tied to the whole power system, all of it. So it's asking, are they trying to empower, or are they trying to take our power away?
Yeah.
I mean, really, it's really what it comes to the core. And that's where it gets real sneaky, because again, your intent, you could have somebody who's going to volunteer, right? Volunteering is a real nice thing. It's hard to get mad at somebody who volunteers, but we've all known those people who volunteer and then talk about it all the time, right? Mm-hmm. And then we've got another person who volunteers and their intent is genuinely to serve. And we find out like, oh, they've been doing Meals on Wheels for 30 years and never said a word. So also paying attention to the intents too, because they can be disguised in the good as well. But where is the underlining coming from?
That's the difference between a statesman and a politician. A statesman loves the people that they represent or the country. A politician's there for power and control. So if we recognize this common enemy, at least we can put the onus on these people to ensure the best that we can. We still have to avoid institution as much as possible, because it's going to happen. Even someone that sounds like a statesman could secretly be a politician. But if at least we were aware, like, that's the issue, I feel like it could unify the country.
It would be huge. Well, and
unify the world, actually.
Those comparisons are huge. Like, even when you're talking about statesman and politician, I mean, let me just throw this one out for an energy fun. John McCain, Trump. Energetically, Trump is if somebody was like, hey, would you take a bullet for this country? No, he's not going to.
Even though he did, actually, already.
Well, but not by his choice, where John McCain would.
Yeah, you have a better feel on energy, but to me, and I know Trump has this massive ego, and I actually love John McCain too. I mean,
I shouldn't have gotten into politics, but I was just utilizing one when you said.
Do you have a feel on Trump that you generally feel that he's only about power and control, or is he about ego and love of country? Because I see him being an egotistical person that loves the country. What it perceives to me. You think it's only power and control. Mm-hmm. That could be my obtuse masculine, not aware of it, but he seems.
I mean,
he seems like
I feel like loves the country, but when I'm saying how much does he love the country, would he take a bullet for the country? No.
Here's what I'm going to tell you about Trump. Why did everyone try to kill him on both sides? Because he was a threat to the power and control systems. He was saying stuff that was making both sides angry. So maybe that wasn't out of love of country, but what it's serving is, what I'm saying is why I love Trump, why I love some of these change catalysts that are coming into humanity, and they're happening. There was when they tried to elect Mitt Romney, here's like this 65-year-old virgin that can totally come in like a businessman and kind of help fix up the government, but he got crucified by the control systems for like one thing he said. And so it's sort of like, okay, you need a wrecking ball. You need, and we're always getting like the relationship that shows up to us, the person that shows up and cheats on us or whatever, it's a byproduct of like what we're calling in. So like we all deserve Trump for
That's what I
better or
was gonna
worse, whether
say.
you love him or hate him. He's exactly what's kind of
He's
like,
exactly what's needed. So
Yeah.
that's what I was going to say. That I feel like we're going to shift into a different thing, which I would say is every single soul here on this planet is playing a purpose. Whether
Yeah.
you think it's good or bad is a judgment. But they're being sent here. You need the polarity for change. Whether, and again, not coming in saying on one side or another, but it's what is needed, that those shifts on those swings. Otherwise,
yeah. And so when change happens, this should also be like a husband and wife collaborating to get this blended approach. If you're polarized in like a very male brain, it's very calloused, so it's going to err. It's going to mess up this ideology always. It's gonna miss out on the compassion, and the other side's gonna always err on pragmatism. It's gonna create these like welfare programs, but then not have the pragmatism that it needs to actually like function properly. Everyone's gonna run out of this, and so we're in this like giant mess. So I guess the challenge for our listeners is to liberate yourself and regain your sovereignty from whatever institutions in your life. And I'm sure what I said today, and I didn't even get like call out very specific institutions or anything, it's going to be offensive. What we talked about, it's going to be offensive to like all these institutions. And fortunately,
to all the systems.
Fortunately, it's a podcast and it's decentralized communication. Nobody can suppress per se. I mean, it's still, I think sometimes things get suppressed, but start getting the conversations out there. There may be a time to take certain actions, but for now, just be aware, be contemplative, look at the yin and yang, look at the polarity in the human condition, look at where we're being manipulated and restricted by the injured masculine and injured feminine. Withdraw from those as much as you can and establish your own little kind of sovereign little groups that are going to weather this storm, because I feel like a lot of change is coming.
It is. I agree. I feel like to add on to everything you just said, which was great, is just trying to keep coming into awareness as much as possible and asking the question, why? Why are you engaging? Why is this? Is this because you feel like this is a good place for you to go, or you heard it's a good place to go? Like, why? Asking those questions. I'd also encourage of paying attention to how you feel. And for those who have a hard time feeling, it is like a gut response. It's not necessarily, it's not emotions coming up. It's like a, yes, I'm pulled into that, or there's like a resistance. So start paying attention to that. A lot of times people, when I'm working with people, it's always in hindsight, right? Well, I'm like, you always knew. They're like, well, yeah, I did. I just overrode that one, right? So start paying attention to the body and how you're feeling, because that higher self, your soul is in there, is more of a feeling, not a thought that's coming through. So that would be yeah.
Well, thanks for tuning in. Sorry we haven't posted in a while, guys. Hope you like this episode, and leave some comments. Tell us what you like, what you don't like, if we think we're way off base, or if you've noticed some of this stuff in your life. Again, the challenge is to use this masculine feminine thing and ask why, and see what happens. But Thank you all.
Thanks for coming.
Okay.